You're listening to Sensitive Changemakers. This podcast is created for highly sensitive leaders and is designed to support you to embrace your strengths and gifts so you can feel more confident in your own mind and body and live a life with intention, purpose, and more importantly, joy. I'm your host, Kate Carter, a fellow HSP who has a BA Honours degree in education, is a fully trained and qualified professional coach and NLP practitioner, and has over 17 years of teaching and over 3 years of coaching experience supporting highly sensitive people. I believe that you can do anything you want to in this life, but that sometimes the path forward becomes muddy with self-doubt and fear of failure. It's my mission to help sensitive thought leaders peel away the self-doubt and stories holding them back, for them to see their own beauty and strength, so they can increase self-confidence and self-trust through thought and embodiment work, and see their path clearly and move forward confidently, living their life with intention and purpose. I would love for you to come and join us. Hello and welcome to Sensitive Changemakers. I hope this episode finds you well. I am taking a break over the Christmas period, and so what I've done is I've got the 3 best performing podcast episodes lined up for you over the next 3 weeks, so you can enjoy listening to those and really get a feel for energy and being highly sensitive and the gifts that are involved in that. And so I would love to get your takeaways and your feedback. Please do let me know. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday period. If you celebrate Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas. If you don't, I hope you get time to relax over this time. And I will see you in 2024. I have a wonderful, wonderful guest today. Nanci Reed is a Sacred Embodiment Coach, but she's so much more than that. And she's going to explain in much more detail about it, all of the different things that she does. She is somebody that I've really connected with through Facebook and through Instagram, and I feel like she is a sacred spirit, and it comes through in everything she does, and I've really enjoyed connecting with her. She is a beautiful, beautiful spirit. So Nanci, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you would like to add?
Oh my goodness, Kate, I am blushing from your absolute kindness. So thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.
In addition to Sacred Embodiment Coaching, I mean, I like to tell people that I wear so many different hats that I can't even tell which one I have on because they all kind of merge into one. But I also am an author of a new book called Happily Ever Now, Not After Everything Else is Perfect. And
I love it.
It is a gentle guide for overcoming the paralysis of perfectionism by embracing our innate guidance. So that is another hat that I wear. And then I'm also an intuition amplifier, which you were kind of alluding to a little bit, which is helping anybody that works with me and connects with me to really learn to trust the wisdom of their soul rather than to tune into their perceived limitations, and to again decide that now is always the perfectly imperfect time to begin living their best life. And then I'm also a Reiki master teacher. I am also a longtime teacher and student and facilitator of A Course in Miracles, a spiritual thought system that I do practice and study and follow and teach. And then I am also a certified Pilates instructor and a spiritual life coach. So yeah, lots of different, you can tell that the perfectionism has been my lifetime story. And I just kept accumulating titles and letters after my name. And I have a master's degree in psychology as well, with an emphasis in emotional intelligence and conflict resolution and mediation.
Wow. I think I need a good sort of 5-10 minutes to process all of that. I think that is incredible. And I know we're going to be talking about perfectionism later on, but I love that you've given a little nod there to your own experiences with it. Just how do you bring all of those bits together? Have you found your own sort of path where you draw on bits and pieces to support your clients? How do you sort of navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say in the beginning, I definitely tried to quote unquote be like everybody else. I tried
Mm.
to fit into the box. I tried to check off all these external boxes that, the world had made basically that I didn't have any alignment with. And so there was always that sense of disconnect. And then there was that real feeding into that desire to want to play small, to
Mm.
stay safe, but also to maintain my perfectionism too. So, as you know, there's an aspect of perfectionism that doesn't get talked about a lot. And actually, I'm thinking about this possibly being the inspiration for my second book, because I already addressed it in the first one, but hint on that a little bit. But what it is that there's this idea with perfectionists that if we can give away our decision-making power to someone or something outside of us, then that means we're off the hook for the outcome.
Mm.
And, that's a real thing that a long time I just felt guilty about. I felt shame about. I felt blame about. I was in denial about. But when I could actually look at that belief
Mm.
with kindness and curiosity, like I advocate always bringing, and really looking at a gentle lens rather than one that was focused with harshness or comparison, everything shifted for me. Everything came into alignment. And what I recognized was that by me knowing who I really am, without defense, without apology, without explanation, without any sort of needing to be anything more than that, then that becomes the consistency in my life. And then I show up as quote unquote her at all of the aspects of my life. So, regardless of what's happening outside of me, all of the things that change, all of the things that are quote unquote inconsistent, because that really is our only thing we can count on in life, it's change, right?
Yeah.
And so, that rather than trying to change the outside, rather than trying to adapt myself to be a different version of me, depending on what I was interacting with, that when I became grounded and certain and clear and calm about the truth of me, and then I am her, right? I am me. And I'm aligning with an energy of flow rather than forcing. Everything shifted. And then I was able to bring that into the relationship, not only with myself, but into all of my external relationships as well. And by me demonstrating what was possible for me, it just naturally seemed to empower and infuse that energy of possibility into those that wanted to work with me, so that I didn't hold anything back. I didn't pretend to be some guru at all. I began to embrace my perfectly imperfect self and recognize that by being in a state of perfectionism and seeking that impossible state, that I was never actually being present. That I was either living from the past and I was projecting into the future what was going to be happening or not happening. And I was also telling myself that there was only a certain outcome that would allow me to maintain my inner peace. All of those things are very disempowering. And, but again, it's really important to look at anything that we come to know on our journey of self-healing, on personal development, spiritual growth, spiritual, anything, awakening, all of that, that there is a gentleness to it, because it doesn't take a lot of effort for us to be harsh with ourselves. It really doesn't, as sad as that is to say. It does take total presence in the present to be kind and to see what's really there and to accept it and love it and create that sacred safe space where everything gets to gently align on the level of mind, body, and spirit. And then we're able to be a part of our self-healing process rather than apart from it.
There's so much there. I almost needed to make notes so that I could talk to you about it. So first of all, what came up for me was the curiosity element. I think that's so absolutely spot on. I know with my own experience with anxiety, and I could relate to so much of what you're saying. And I think that's why we click on so many different levels. But yeah, that curiosity element, looking at, like you were saying, how easy it is to be incredibly hard on ourselves and expect so much from ourselves with those shoulds and those have tos that come into play, and not necessarily from us, but from society possibly, and other people's voices in our heads that add to that. But changing that into curiosity, changing that into, oh, interesting, let's look at this a little bit more differently. And that gentle aspect, that compassion, that looking at things in a nicer kind of way, I think is, like you said, absolutely life-changing. And if you can tap into that, it changes everything. So those are the two bits that really came up for me. I think you've explained really well there your own journey. Is there anything else you want to bring that would enable the audience to understand a little bit more where you came from and how you got to those realizations, to those kind of big aha moments?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was really about trusting that inner guidance within me, even when the world said I was crazy.
Yeah.
Even when I moved to Los Angeles and started a business from scratch in the middle of a recession. So, all the things that you quote unquote shouldn't be doing. And, my own family was questioning my sanity, I think, at that point. And really thinking like, you're going to go to the one of the biggest cities in the entire world in the middle of a recession and you think you're going to succeed? Like, that's impossible. But I've always been a believer in impossible things. And I speak about this a lot in my book, where the story of Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll was a huge influence on me as a child. And then as I grew up, I realized actually it was a much more profound influence than I had first known, which is this idea that our curiosity can lead us into experiencing so much more than our judgments do. And so if we are going to put limits on what's possible, and we're going to allow our past to dictate our present, because we're so focused on trying to make a specific future, then we're going to miss the opportunities that exist right now. And we're going to miss the opportunities to connect with others in an authentic way. So when I first moved to Los Angeles and I started my business from total scratch, I literally walked up and down Ventura Boulevard. I'm not sure if you've been there, but it is a long street. And so I walked a very long way up and down, like with my little like pamphlets that I had printed out at Kinko's or something like that about the work I did and how I believed in myself and everything like that. And I walked into these like boutiques where I knew no one. Like I was starting out as a newly divorced, and all these things that had really led to a lot of shame and not being able to have children, I didn't think, and all these other like identities, right, that I'd been really not agreeing with my inner perfectionist at all. And yet here I was, and there was that also part of me that was that inner voice, that intuition that had always been there, that I was the weird kid growing up, that I'd be with my mom places and I'd be like, Mom, why is that little girl so sad? And we'd be in an ice cream shop or something. And she's like, she's not sad. She's eating ice cream. And I'm like, no, she's really sad. Something happened. And it happened so often that she finally kind of indulged my, curiosity. And she walked up to a mom one day with that little girl. And she said, this is going to sound kind of strange, I know, but like something happened today. Are you guys here because there's something sad or something? And the mom was like, oh yeah, actually we had to put our, dog down, and my daughter's been so heartbroken over it. And we thought ice cream might, help cheer her up or something. And she's like, how did you know? And so then after that, my mom was much more affirming of those energetic like hits that I would get. But I also wanted to be normal. And, I was really very self-conscious and I remember when, like in junior high, we were asked to write an essay about ourselves, and we were asked to talk about the one superpower that we would want more than anything in the entire world if we could have it. And almost everyone chose flying, which I don't know why, but everyone chose flying. I chose invisibility because I was so self-conscious of being seen as different, as being seen as not enough, as being seen as not perfect, right? And that was just within me. And part of it was because I felt so much, like I could feel spaces before I would even go into them. I would always immediately look for the exit routes when I would go into a place so that I would know I could get out of there, because at that point in my life, I couldn't tell the feelings that I was feeling if they were my own or if they were someone else's. And I had no protection for myself. I had no way to ground myself. I had no way to limit that or to, put up any kind of energetic boundaries or anything like that. And I didn't even know those words at that point too, and I couldn't talk to anyone about this. I couldn't talk to my friends. I just wanted to be normal, quote unquote. So I really dampened that connection. And I really, muted basically my inner voice, because I just felt like that I was odd, and I wanted to be like everybody else. I didn't realize that it was actually a gift. To me, it was a curse. And so there was a long time that I went through believing that it was a curse. And so I really disconnected myself from it. But even though I was having that belief, I would go to like coffee shops or something, I can remember in college, and complete strangers would come up to me and they would tell me their entire life story. And I wouldn't ask them for it. They would just start talking to me. And at first I thought maybe they're just hitting on me or something, because it would be men. And then it was women too. And I was like, well, no, probably not. Everyone is hitting on me. I'm not, that gorgeous. And I was, well aware of that. So then I was like, okay, there's something there that they're picking up on. And I'm just having, I would literally go into coffee shops when I first moved to LA, because I was still trying to wrestle with that. And I would wear headphones because I thought then people would bother me as much. They thought that I had headphones on and I was working on something, but they still would come and they would like tap my shoulder or something like that. And this just kept happening.
Yeah.
And I realized the other day, actually, when I was thinking about this, that this doesn't really happen anymore, because I don't think that I'm hiding it anymore. And so it's not like I'm having to be quote unquote found for this. People can find me really easily now, and they can see all my woo and all my, everything that's out there, because I'm not hiding it, and I'm not trying to be apart from it anymore. I'm actually letting it be a part of me. And so all of that was going on in the background. And so it's like I had these natural inclinations. I had these intuitions about things. And yet I also was trying to quote unquote be normal. And I was trying to be like everybody else. And I didn't want to be different. I didn't want people to think I was a fraud, right? That was my biggest fear, was that somehow somebody would think that I was making things up, or that even though I had so much proof that I was really connected to something that was bigger than me. And so that was my really big fear, was that in being a fraud. And even like with writing my book, it was a really big fear about, I don't have enough letters after my name. I've only got a master's degree. I really should have gone on for that PhD. And, and that was a huge, huge, huge chasm for me to really walk as a perfectionist. Right. And so being able to say, no, writing the book for 7 years is my dissertation on healing. And that is the equivalent of that, because my story is so much bigger than me. And my story is, again, to remind us that if it's possible for one of us, it's possible for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love, as you're talking through that, again, I can absolutely relate, although probably not to the extent that you can, but absolutely early on in my life, knowing that I could really feel what somebody else was feeling, but I didn't understand when it was me and when it wasn't me. And so I took it all on as me. And I swear, in hindsight, was one of the reasons I really struggled with anxiety, because I just couldn't cope with it all. And like you were saying, instead of understanding or bracing it, because you have nobody to support you with it, you just completely pull away from it and deny that it's there. Or I definitely did. It was easier not to talk to people. it was easier not to go places. It was easier to stay in the house. It was just easier to pull back from everything. And yeah, as you said, it never goes away. That voice is always there. And it's, again, showing that gentle side, that compassionate side, to actually start listening to it again. So I absolutely love that. How have you found, as you've been supporting clients, do you find that you have to, because you were talking a lot there about understanding what's your energy and understanding what somebody else is, and grounding in your truth, I would imagine, your kind of strengths and your gifts. Do you have a kind of practice that you do before you have a conversation with somebody or a session with somebody when you're working? I would be really interested to see how you ground yourself, because you're so empathic and because you can actually feel all of those different things. How do you do that?
Well, so rather than have a specific ritual, because again, perfectionism would come out, I find that instead I invite with an intention, right? So I set the intention of inviting whatever is going to be the most helpful to the situation, to the individual, and to the highest good for all to come through me, and to remind me that I am not different than the one that I am speaking to, that we are connected to something so much bigger than just an individual self. And that if I can feel that exchange energy, rather than just that I'm giving something to someone that, is this empty whatever, like they're not. I mean, there's no way that anybody that reaches out to me, I see their value as being my teacher just as much as I am for them. And that whether or not they're, physically teaching me something, or if it's just a reminder of something that they talk about and I go, oh yeah, that's still something that triggers me, or that's still something I'm looking at, or wow, that's something that I've really worked with and I'm so proud of myself. And that's a great reminder of that, whatever it is, there's a space of gratitude. And what I have really learned is that when you're in a space of gratitude, you cannot be in a space of anxiety. And so when you're in a space of true gratitude, you're also in the present. And so when I'm working with a client, I do my best to, again, perfectly, imperfectly, right? To really be there with them and to trust those little gentle nudges, even if they seem ridiculous. I mean, I remember like one of my first Pilates clients that I worked with, I was speaking to her ahead of time before our session started, and we were both in these chairs sitting next to each other. And I just kept hearing this little voice say, ask her about her shoes. And I was like, what? Like, that cannot be right. Like, I must have had some bad food last night or something. Like, this is completely bizarre. But because I've had the experiences I've had, I paused and I was like, is this really true? Like asking that silently to myself. And I heard yes. And so I was like, okay. So I asked her, I said, so this is going to sound funny, but can you tell me about your shoes? And she started to cry. And she was like, oh, those were the last gift that I received from my father before he died. And, this issue that I've been dealing with that I came here to talk to you about with my knee started after he died. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, of course, I mean, and so it was like, it was sort of like that joke about that God sends have you heard about that? The rowboat and right. And the different things to show up when you're in the flood. And then you say like, I had faith in you. Why didn't you rescue me? And he's like, I sent you all those things. And you kept saying no to all of them, So it was kind of like, well, how many more times did my intuition have to prove to me that it was speaking? Right. And I did, I kept on still denying it. Because it's perfectly imperfect. Like, I would like to say that my perfectionism is totally cured now after writing this book. It's not, it's 100% not. And I've had to really look at that and own that, but own it without guilt, own it without shame or blame, and be able to say, this is non-linear. This is a non-linear process. This is something that you can go through your entire lifetime. And it's not going to be linear when you look back on it. It's going to be more of like a spiral. And, kind of going back to, again, the Alice in Wonderland idea, like where time is not what we think it is. And that if it's going to be that falling asleep, quote unquote, is what got us into this place of feeling disconnected from our truth, then it's gently awakening that's going to undo that, right? But the awakening doesn't have to be an instant. It can be, but there's no more value to it being an instant than if it takes a lifetime, as long as you're free of judgment, right? From that. Because if you have an instant awakening and then you go back the next instant to being a horrible, unkind, judgmental person, then, that instant awakening obviously didn't have that big of an impact, unless you take the purpose of it and then you let that continue to lead you. So I always tell clients that, when you have these stumbles in life, quote unquote, don't see them as negating any of the progress that you've made so far, because they don't. So, whatever you've experienced, take that in as like a muscle memory, basically, on a spiritual and emotional level. And you can also see that physically too, with people that work with me for injuries from rehabilitation and that kind of thing as well. So it's all connected. And the way that I work with somebody when we work on their body is the same way that I work with them when we work at things from a spiritual perspective, or from more of a social emotional, kind of intelligence perspective as well. And that's coming back to, again, that I found the sameness within me. And then I extend that into all the work that I do that looks very, very, very different on the surface, but it all has that same foundation, that same core thread that runs through it.
And so when you're working with somebody, just to kind of highlight what you were saying there, it's very much coming at it from being present and from that place of gratitude and being open to what happens in that relationship.
Like I was speaking to a client recently, and I had asked her what it was that she really wanted to focus on for that day. So one of the things that I've come to know in my business too is that a lot of coaches, they have these programs, quote unquote, and they have like a set sort of agenda to them, and they have a set number of calls, and they have a set this and a set that. And that's awesome if that works for them. It doesn't work for me. What works for me best is that when I tell clients that you have so many hours of time with me, and that time gets to be used in whatever way is going to be the most helpful for them. And that it can be used to work on their body, it can be used to work on their mind, it can be used to work on their spirit, it can be used to work on all three of them together. We can devote a 30-minute call every so often. We can devote a 15-minute check-in. There's different things obviously that make it work on both sides. But really to let them know that this is about meeting them where they are. And so there might be a certain week that they want to use 3 hours of their time. And if I have the possibility to do that, I want them to know that that is possible for us, so that they can feel that full support. And then, they get to have so many hours. And when those hours run out, they can continue, or they can say, I'm good. And I want them to feel good. I'm probably a very unusual coach that way, I think. And I was certainly an unusual Pilates instructor. Clients have told me over the years with that too, where I would say to them from the very first session, I would say, my goal for you is to not need me. And they'd be like, what? Don't you want to get me into some kind of maintenance program or something? And I was like, no. I only want you to be here when it's helpful to you and when it's meaningful to you. And when you're ready to leave, I want you to trust that it's time for you to go. You can always come back. And I sure hope that if you found it helpful, that you'll send me anybody else, so that there's a next person to come in and take that space. But you absolutely should not feel obligated. And you only want to be listening to those whispers, in your heart. And if they're not saying that this work is needed anymore, or if there's something next that you want to explore, then again, perfectly imperfect, go out and do that. And you can always come back. I'll always make space for you again. But I see you as having everything be possible. So when you believe that nothing is impossible, then what is? And the answer is everything, right?
Yeah.
So that's really where I come from. And then regardless of what we're working on, if it's, the form of it, it doesn't matter. I have lots of different hats, as I shared before. So I can pretty much meet almost anybody where they are. I haven't met anyone so far that's come to me with something where I'm like, I have no idea how to help you. I have no, let me just 100% refer you. Even if I've referred them for different portions of our work together, I have been able to meet any client that's come to me. And I've worked with over 1,000 private clients since I began my business. And it's all been because mostly of referral that they found me. I didn't do a lot of advertising.
And isn't that the beautiful thing? I mean, that just speaks to your awesomeness, I think, absolutely. And I love what you were saying about that, because I'm a huge advocate for what I have termed sort of true coaching, which is, like you were saying, meeting them where they're at and allowing them to bring what they need to into that space. I had, as you were talking, it reminded me of a client call this week, and we didn't have a set agenda, and we had a great session. And she actually messaged me after and said, I know we didn't have an agenda, but that was an amazing time and I got so much out of it, because it enables that kind of relationship and that kind of I suppose, way forward for them that's going to work for them, rather than you saying, like you were saying with those programs, this is the agenda and this is what we've got to get through. It's much more of an open flow. I really would like to delve a little bit more into this perfectionism, because I know it's been such a big thing for you and a big thing for you to navigate. And what I love about the way that you've been speaking about it so far is that it's not just the traditional perfectionism, which is about generally work or things that we produce, like, oh, this isn't quite good enough yet, I want to keep it back until it's perfect, even though I think that does play a role. But it's very much what I'm hearing is that perfectionism within, like us being good enough, perfect enough. And I remember having a conversation probably 3 or 4 years ago now with my first coach, and her saying, well, that's a perfectionism, you are a perfectionist, Kate. I'm like, no, not, because I'm not. In terms of work and things, I was okay for it to be good enough. But she was like, no, I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about you as Kate. And I was like, oh yes, because I am a bit like what you were saying earlier, quite hard on myself, and I know that I've got quite high expectations, and that side of things is incredibly tough, I find, to, like you were saying, imperfectly. It's really tough to keep reminding myself to slow down, be gentle, more of that nourishing curiosity, rather than, Kate, why haven't you done this yet? So I would love to delve in a little bit more with that, and get your take on it. What would you really like our audience to hear about perfectionism?
Well, so one of the things that has been the most helpful for me on my journey, and I talk about this in the book, is really looking at my language with myself. The energy of what do you think? And then to respond with, I think da 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 da, is actually responding to a question with an energy of questioning. Because when you say, I think, there is that element of uncertainty. There is that unknown quality to it. And you're sort of testing the waters a little bit. I even caught myself saying it earlier about, I think I'm going to be writing this in my next book. And then I was like, I know this is going to be a part, because there's a big difference. And it sounds kind of funny at first. And I've had clients tell me the funniest stories about their experience with this. But what I would say from my own experience is that when you're willing to try this, it can be a game changer in your journey with overcoming gently perfectionism, which is that the next time, especially a well-meaning family member, let's say, is poking their nose into something that you are just over, and you feel like 1,000 times and again you're having to defend or explain or apologize or somehow prove, right, your stance on it, that rather than respond to their question about, so when are you going to start your entrepreneur, dream coming true? Or, when are you going to write that next book? Instead of responding with, I think, and then whatever your answer is, take a beat, pause, breathe in that truth of you, align yourself on body, mind, and spirit with that truth, and know that it's enough. That you don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to explain your reasoning. You don't have to, put out some kind of theorem, basically, like you're back in math class or something, in order to have there be an answer. That your answer can come from knowing what is true for you. And it's a huge shift when you say, instead of, I think my next book will be written next fall, to say instead, I know my book is coming and it will be available right on time.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say that, the other person can't help but be like, oh, okay. And they just accept it. And they look really silly if they still question you after you've said, I know. And I've tested this with people too. Whereas when you say, I think, it opens the door for them to continue to feed those doubts within you by being like, well, why? And then that's the other question that I tell people to really look at, is that idea of asking for your why. Well, when we say why to anybody else, including ourselves, there's that immediate response of judgment or of defense, right? We go, okay, so why am I doing it that way? Or, why did you make that decision? Well, right away, you're like, oh, okay, I need to come up with all the proof. I better have, X, Y, Z, and ABC all over again too. And, maybe I need to even raise that to an exponential power or something like that. I need to show evidence to prove my answer here. Versus if you ask yourself, what is the purpose? What is this serving? What is this feeding? Right? Go into that space of curiosity rather than preconceived judgment or comparison. It's a huge shift from something very, very, very small. And the transformations that are possible from that are just, they're infinite, really. And those two things have been absolute game changers for me in all aspects of my life. And so when I'm really being present, perfectly, imperfectly, and when I'm really aware of my own language with myself, my whole energetic signature and flow shifts as well to align with that. Whereas if I feel urgency, if I feel on the spot, if I feel like that deer in headlights that I always did my entire life, that, I needed to come up with an answer right away, that I needed to just explain my decision making, I needed to, have some kind of justification for it or whatever it was, then right away I'll respond with, I think, and then I'll go into that why energy instead. Whereas if I'm making space, then it'll be a, what is the purpose? Yeah. How can I make space for the how to unfold here?
It's so interesting, because when I was training as a coach, that was one thing that we were taught and trained in, was actually to avoid the question why, because it does create a defense mechanism in the person that you're talking to, and they do get their back up and try, like you were saying, feel that they have to justify what you've asked them,
or they just shut down completely.
Absolutely,
right?
And
completely,
and that's completely not the energy that you want in a coaching session. You want them to feel safe enough to delve deeper. So I love the fact that you brought that up. I hadn't really thought about the think question, but of course it makes absolute sense, and I love language. So I love the fact that that comes into play. And of course the word think, it's not certain, and it's got an element of the unknown. And of course that, we are amazing creatures, and I love the fact that subliminally we're picking that up in conversation and using that. So I'm really that's one of my nuggets of information I'm going to take away with me today. So I've absolutely loved that. And I know as people listening to this are going to be so excited to know more about you, where they can find your book, where they can find new details about your new book coming up when we've got that in play. So where can people find you?
Okay, so they can find me a lot of places, but I'll start off with the main place, which is my main website, which is nancireed.com. So that's NanciReed.com. And they can go there and find just about everything. They can also go find out about my book at happilyevernow.book, just like it sounds.com. They can find it there. They can find me on Facebook at Happily Ever Living. They can find me on Instagram at Nanci Ann Reed. They can also find me at Happily Ever Living on Instagram, and they can now find me on Threads as well at Nanci Ann Reed and also Happily Ever Living. And they can also find me on Clubhouse, where I teach a weekly room with these two other amazing teachers of A Course in Miracles every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific. And I am there under Nanci Reed, I believe. Yeah, Nanci Reed. And so they can find me there and connect as well. And then they can always reach out to me through my website and send me a message. I have a free gift right now that I just made available, which is called Align with Love Self-Healing Gift Set. And you can access that simply by looking at my website on the top fold of the screen. Basically, it'll allow you to access that, and you can click on it and receive all those goodies. And there's even an extra bonus for saying yes to that as well.
Lovely. And I will definitely make sure that all of those links are in the show notes. What a wonderful, I was going to say wonderful gift. That is a wonderful gift. I was even repeating the word, but I think that is just such a wonderful thing to offer people. So thank you so much for that. I have absolutely loved this conversation, Nanci. I'm going to go away. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go away and rethink everything that we've talked about today. And I
Don't
will
rethink it. Know it.
Yes, absolutely. I will reflect. That's a better word.
Yes,
I will definitely reflect on this. And I think I will have a lot more aha moments and nuggets, as things sort of marinate and seep in. I'll be like, remember when she said that? I know that is definitely the type of effect this conversation has had on me. So I'm hoping it's had the same effect on the audience, and they're going to go away possibly wanting to listen to this a few times so that it can kind of seep in. And I can imagine that they will take something different away every single time. So thank you so much for the depth and just the richness of this conversation. I've loved it. Just thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. This was so lovely. And I'm just so grateful for our connection and for me trusting that little intuitive nudge to connect with you in the first place. So this is total confirmation of leaning into those whispers of the heart.
Absolutely. What a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you have any takeaways or any questions, please do reach out to me either through Instagram, LinkedIn or Facebook at Kate Carter Coaching, or you can email me at kate@katecarter.co.uk. I always love to hear your feedback and the things that you have taken from the podcast. If you know of any other highly sensitive people, then please do share this so that I can reach more and support more highly sensitive people to embrace their strengths and gifts. As a thank you, I will pick a winner every month for a free 50-minute coaching session with me. Thank you so, so much.